without further ado, Jerome.
Is that it?
That's it. You want me to give you a long introduction?
No, I don't.
Okay. We can give you a long introduction. So Jerome is awesome. He has lots of apartments, and he has a couple of podcasts. He's been guest speaker at many different conferences and events. Even holds his own conference. I just drew a blank on what it was called, but it was
Family Investment.
Yeah. So usually it's a live event in the Carolinas, Mid-Atlantic area. This year it was completely virtual, and heard really, really good things about it. I had a lot of stuff that weekend. Sorry, Jerome couldn't go, but
you guys supported though. Todd showed up.
Yep, Todd showed up, and that's why I heard it was really, really good. So, yeah, with that said, tonight we're going to hear about the 5 missteps every multifamily investor should avoid. And now, without further ado, Jerome Myers.
I keep trying to kick the can down the road because I don't have an hour worth of content, guys. Brian, still flattered and appreciative for the opportunity to share with your group. I try to make every meeting you guys have because I find a lot of value in this group. I think you've got a lot of great people sharing, and I learn and meet great people every time I come. So for all of you who've come, I'm not sure if you came for me or the networking. Doesn't matter. It's all here, and we're going to have some fun tonight. So I like interaction. And so if you own a multifamily property, hit a 1, drop a 1 in the chat box just so I can see who's already owning. 3 1s. Come on. 4, 5. Caitlin, when did you buy property? Okay. All right. So if you haven't bought a property yet, drop a 2. Okay. All right. I'm getting a feel for who we're talking to now. So the one thing I like to lead with, and I think Brian will agree with this, right? So there's a lot of different educators in the space, and there's very few educators who actually help people buy properties. Brian is one of the exceptions that I've met, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to be around him and watch his journey. So the guys at 4 Oaks have closed 5 deals in the last year?
4 in the last year, and number 5's under contract.
Right. And so a lot of people don't have anywhere near that level of success. I say that to tell you that if you've been working at it for a year or 2 years, don't give up, don't stop, because eventually you can get that breakthrough. But I think getting the appropriate foundation is what's going to set you up in order to be able to get the deal done. And I think a lot of people just try to skip that out. So I've got like 14 slides, and I'm probably going to be able to run through that in 25 to 30 minutes. Yep. If you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat as I go along. And then when I get to the end, I'll come back and pick all that stuff up if everybody's good with that. And I am not going to be able to see everything because I'm going to go full screen on my presentation. So here's the 5 missteps that I think every multifamily investor should avoid. But before we get into those steps, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview. So we're going to talk a little bit about why I started speaking, because I think it's always important to share, because a lot of people are in the space, they're having some success, and they're not telling their story. And I think it's extremely important. So I'm going to get vulnerable with you guys and share that. I'm going to run through the 5 mistakes. I'm going to offer you some free resources, and then we'll do the Q&A. I'll wrap up, and then we'll dive into the different breakout rooms so that you guys can network. And please don't jump off before the networking, because that's where you actually meet people who are doing deals or can help you get deals done. And the disclaimer is, I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm not a CPA nor an attorney. So this is just for entertainment and education. So if you go back to May of 2019 and before, you won't find me anywhere. There's no online photos. I had no real social media presence. It was all about my brand. I was really a ghost, and I was active on social media, but more a lurker than a participant or a content creator. And by being invisible, when I started thinking about it, and this mastermind group, they pointed out that I was part of a bigger problem. And so, here's kind of my history, my track record. So before I left corporate America, I built a $20 million division for a Fortune 550. While I was doing that, I was pretty well compensated. So I had the opportunity to lend private money. And in that private money lending, I was learning a whole lot about the rehab business. At the end of 2016, I dropped out of corporate America and I started going down this path of self-education related to apartments. And I found the first deal that I wanted to do, but I was turned away by 10 banks. They didn't care about my credit score. They didn't care about the cash. They told me that I didn't have any experience. And I went back and told them, hey, I went to YouTube University. I know everything I need to do, everything I need to be successful at investing in apartment buildings. But alas, they wouldn't lend me $1 million to buy my first property. So I went and started fixing and flipping houses off of hard money and some of the cash that I had available. While I was sitting on the porch or the stoop of one of those properties, I got the opportunity to be invited into a deal. The guy that pulled up, he was doing a flip down the street. He pulled up, he was like, hey, let me check out the finishes. We're going to do a flip. And I just want to make sure that we are in alignment with what the market is really looking for. And so during that conversation, and he started telling me, hey, I'm getting ready to make an offer on this building. I was like, I tried to buy that 4 or 5 months ago. Long story short, he let me come into the deal with him. And I was fortunate enough to be the asset manager on that project. It was a 23 unit in Richmond, Virginia. And we bought it with one of the big brokerage houses and they did a press release. And because they did a press release, the banks that turned me away found out that I could actually close a deal. And so they started calling me when my trajectory changed because I had access to capital. And so we did a couple of deals and we didn't go full cycle because we haven't exited anything that we've purchased, but we started systematizing. And so we figured out how we were going to bring money to deals. We started executing and doing our repositions. And I started it last year and we're still working on it. We're working on a 120 unit development deal. And so today we've closed like 5 properties and we've got this development deal underway. The reason why I say I was part of a bigger problem was because I had a pretty successful track record for what I'd been doing in corporate America and the things that I've been doing outside, but I wasn't telling anybody about it. And so what I learned while I was in corporate America is that there's a lot of people out there who don't see somebody who either has the same background as them. The way I like to characterize it is somebody who looks like them. And so if you don't see somebody who looks like you, I want to tell you that doesn't mean anything. And I'm really grateful to Brian because he's been willing to share his platform, especially like the podcast, with a diverse array of people. And that gives everybody an example that they can look to or point to and say, hey, well, if that guy did it, then I can do it. Or if that gal did it, I can do it. And I really want you guys, if you've got a great story, and I don't think mine is all that special, I want you to start sharing your story. So when you have success or when other people are looking to have some success, they can point to you as a frame of reference as somebody who can get this thing done. And so, all these different people spoke at a conference that I was fortunate enough to speak at in the beginning of the summer. And then Brian and I were fortunate enough to speak at Dealmaker Live, which was, Michael Blank thing. I guess it was a few weeks ago. I guess it's a month ago now.
Yeah, it's actually this time last month. It was like 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, because my wife spoke at the spouses portion on our anniversary. And that was, so I'll remember that date.
For sure.
Yeah.
And so again, just show others that they can do it too, right? Because I think everybody can do this as long as they have the right foundational knowledge. And, what does that really have to do with multifamily investing? I think there's a bunch of different approaches. There's some people who are going to go catch Moby Dick, as I call it, right? They're going to go get the big well. They're going to take it down. They're going to raise money from 200 people, and they're going to get the deal done. There's other people who are going to go do a joint venture, and they're going to partner with 3 people, 4, 5, 6 people, and they're going to take down a smaller property with a smaller buy price, and they're going to get it done. At the end of the day, my whole goal is just to make sure that people get into this space, and when they get into the space, they make fewer mistakes. And so we started a podcast, and a lot of my talks are around mistakes or missteps, because it doesn't make sense for me to make the same mistake that Brian made or Brian to make the same mistake I made. We're not competing with each other after the deal is purchased. We might be competing to get the deal awarded, but once the deal is awarded, we're peers, we're buddies, we're pals, and we want to learn from each other along the way. So the first misstep, and I think it's the one that's most common, is only self-educating. And a lot of people, I will tell you that all the information is out there for free. Everything that you need to know, you can find somewhere on the internet. And I made this misstep. I listened to 40 hours of content each week, right? And that was a combination, that was just podcasts. Then there were the books that I looked at. There were the YouTube videos that I watched. I would go to my RIA, but they never talked about multifamily. But that was another investment of time. The things that I didn't really know how to do when I was getting into the space was I didn't know there were multifamily conferences. Like, I was transitioning from a project management background. And so I didn't know that, hey, you should go to conferences to learn from people and meet people. And that part is like super challenging for me because I'm an introvert. It's like, why do I want to go meet a bunch of people? And you hear it a lot. Your network is your net worth. And it's never more true than when in multifamily. So I grew up the son of a soldier and a stay-at-home mom. And, my dad was in the Marines at one point, and then he moved over to the Army. And we didn't have wealthy people coming around and hang out and talk about owning multi-million-dollar or any of that other stuff. And so I had to go meet people who wanted to do this type of stuff. And just as a perfect example of this, like that deal, part of the reason why the banks wouldn't lend to me, one was experience, but the other was I didn't have net worth outside of my home that was equal to the loan amount. And so if somebody's going to go buy a $6 million building, you need net worth outside your primary residence. And a lot of people want it outside of your retirement account that matches that loan amount. And if you don't have people organically that are in your network that have that, then you got to go find a way to connect with them. And so, the conferences are a really great way to do it. And meetups like these is another one. My second misstep, right? So, and these aren't just my missteps, but I hear them over and over again, selecting the wrong partners. And so this image is one of my favorite images. It's, all these guys are in the same boat, but only two of them think that they have a problem. And they've got their buckets out and they're trying to get the water out the boat. The guys that are sitting in the other end saying, glad it's not in our end, well, they're all going to sink. And once you get into a deal, everybody's in the same boat. If the deal isn't performing, you can't point and say, hey, Jerome didn't do what he was supposed to do, so the deal's going to fail, because you're all going to lose your risk capital if you don't actually get the deal done and operated the way that it's supposed to be done. I talk about partnership more than anything because when the partnership breaks up, it can be more destructive to your financial future than a marriage. And especially if you're signing a recourse loan. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, I just go get a recourse loan. There's a ton of carve-outs in that recourse loan that can flip it, or that non-recourse loan that can flip it back to recourse. So you really, really want to understand who you're partnering with and, who are the wrong partners or who could be the wrong partners. Property manager. I had a property manager who was doing what I consider to be a terrible job. We ended up terminating the contract after 9 months. And because when we even went to court over this, he had an early termination clause in the contract. And he said that I didn't give him all the proper warnings before I terminated it. So he was going to charge me for the last quarter of the contract for management fees based on the previous quarter's performance. And so I ended up paying 2 property managers to manage that property for about 3 months, which goes to show you how bad I really wanted out of that contract. Your ownership group, right? The people that you partnership with on the deal, like you got to make sure everybody's aligned. And so if you don't actually understand the values of the people that you're partnering with, and I call it like, you don't want to get in a one-night stand, right? You don't want to meet a person at a meetup or a conference, and then 2 weeks later, you're doing a deal together. You actually want to get to know the people, understand what they're about, see them under pressure, so that when something happens, you know that they have your back and they're going to grab a bucket instead of watching you try to get the water out of the boat. Your contractor is almost as important as your property manager. So if you're doing a value add play, You're going to have to spend some time there with the contractor, getting the construction plans put together, and then making sure that they're executing. If For me in our operations, our biggest expense the majority of the time is vacancy. And so if you can figure out how to get those units turned quickly, get them filled back up, you can eliminate one of the biggest detractors from your profit. If you don't have the right attorney putting together your operating agreement, you can leave yourself in a world of hurt because you won't be able to make decisions. And I've seen situations where one partner in the deal has held the whole deal captive. And in that captivity, the deal has failed. And that is a disaster for the people who are trying to build wealth, because I think that's what everybody's trying to do. The CPA is one that a lot of people underestimate, but taxes are another huge expense to the deal. And so if you can work with the right accounting partner, you can save yourself and your partners a tremendous amount of money. And so, those are the people that we're dealing with. And I think the ethics are what's going to make the biggest difference. And I don't see a lot of people spending time talking about this because it's kind of, I don't know, maybe it's taboo, right? But you really want to understand who the person is. Like, what are their characteristics? If person and everybody else is the ones making mistakes and that person is perfect, I can guarantee you when you do a deal with that person, they're not magically going to be the one making mistakes. You're just going to be another one of those people who make mistakes. And I don't know if you actually want to partner with somebody like that. You want to see what happens when they're under stress. Are they able to communicate? Do they like verbal, or would they like to put things in writing? Are they a text messenger? I remember that we were working through our construction plan and I sent this really long email, and one of the partners said, I don't have time to read your emails. Like, we can talk about it in a meeting. And I was trying to avoid yet another meeting by putting everything down in writing so that people can actually think about it and respond to the different points. And so being able to work through those communication styles and the methods that you guys are going to use is like super important. Make sure that everybody doesn't have the same skill set. If you are great at analytics and you can underwrite a deal, awesome, do that. But don't get 3 or 4 other people into your deal that do the same thing, because maybe somebody needs to go raise money. Maybe somebody needs to manage the construction. Maybe somebody needs to be putting the team together and organizing the different roles and responsibilities. Whatever that skill set is, make sure that you guys are covered, because you don't want everybody to be strong at one thing and then you have a gap somewhere else. And then make sure you guys have a similar goal in investing, right? The business plans vary widely. Some people want to come in and flip a deal. They're never going to hold anything more than 3 years. Then there's other people, or I can talk about the development deal. Our loan is for 40 years. It's fully amortized, and it's an opportunity zone project on top of that. So we're going to keep it for at least 10 years, but it doesn't make sense to sell it if we're going to lock in that sub 3%, and we're going to be in a really good position overall. So, if your goals aren't aligned on the deal, you can get in a place where people are super upset. And I think the other way that I like to describe this is when a person is interested in maximizing the profit. Like, there's some people who just want to make money. That's the only reason they're investing. And there's other people who want to make an impact in the community. And so sometimes those decisions they're opposed. If you can come in and get somebody who's aligned with you, is like, I want to make an impact in the community and make money, or we're just going to figure out how we can make as much money as possible. You need to, work through those two folk, work with people who have a similar goal so that you can get along the way. And I think the last example I'll use on this is one of my partners, James Bryant. He has a goal of impacting 500 families through his multifamily investing. My goal is to buy 1,000 doors in Greensboro. He and I are aligned up to about 5,000 or 500 doors. After that, James is probably going to bail, and I'll need to find other partners to do deals with up above 500 property or 500 units. And so, make sure that your goals are aligned. And then when they aren't aligned anymore, you guys have a pretty defined plan to separate and go about your ways without, being upset with each other.
Hey, Jerome, question for you back on the previous misstep.
Okay.
We had a lot of twos in the room. You have a list of people that they should be careful selecting. For those who put 2 on the board, which one should they find first? What's kind of the order, would you say?
Yeah. So This is a very interesting question. So the assumption
Yeah.
is they already have a deal in hand, right?
The assumption is they're still looking for their first deal as well. So I think most people with twos on the board are searching for their first deal, don't have a deal in hand already, but they're trying to get on the map, so to speak.
Yeah. So I would go with ownership group.
Mhm.
I think that is what's going to give you clarity on what type of deal you can do. You know how much money you have, but if money is a concern or balance sheet or liquidity is a concern, then I think it's super important that you know who you're going to buy with. And then all the other stuff will flow from there. Because I think you really need a deal before you do the other stuff.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly on that one. Find a couple of good partners that you can um, carry the load with. Now, there's a question that relates to this subject. Do you mind if I just hit it right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So from Julie Hawley, what are some of the tells for if somebody won't handle sideways situations well?
Watching
So,
them deal with it somewhere else, right? So their word choice is super important. If if they're always a victim, you don't want to partner with them. You're looking for people who are going to take extreme ownership and accountability for whatever they did. If the person's perfect, you don't want to deal with them. And I think those two things in and of themselves will take it a really long way. And I think maybe the final one is I look for people who are humble, right? Like I was talking to somebody today and they brought Brian up. They're like, Brian's a really nice guy. Like he's super humble for the amount of success he's had so far. I was like, yeah, he is. And the ability to be humble gets the ego out the way, right? Now you can, the best decision can win or the best option can win instead of the person making sure that they're right. Because some people will fight just to be right, and them being right is not ever as important as making the best decision for the property.
yeah, I learned very painfully a long time ago that being right is less important. But all right. And on the flip side, same follow up question from Julie: can somebody be too nice or take too much ownership? I like that.
Can they take too much ownership? Yes, but I'd rather them be on that side of the spectrum than just their feet kicked up watching everybody else work.
Yeah, I think she's referring to the type of person who wants to do everything and kind of crowds everybody else out, and that's also I would say a little more difficult. It's difficult to handle, but I agree, Jerome. You'd rather have that person than the one who doesn't take any blame or whatnot.
Yeah, but the person who crowds everybody out, the fact of the matter is like everybody's going to know what needs to be done. And so if you're trying to make something happen, you can beat them to the punch,
Mhm.
right? Like the financials are going to come out. There's some reporting that needs to be done. If you get the financials the same time they do, and you just take it and you give it to them, then you potentially win their trust.
Yeah.
And that is usually what happens is they got let down and they just decided that they can't count on anybody anymore.
Another follow-up question, right along the same lines, and deals with the operating agreement. It says, what are some ways to be proactive and specify these things in the operating agreements?
Yeah, so voting from my perspective is the most important thing that you'll need because the operating agreement is put in place so that when things go wrong, you can resolve them. If you have to pull it out, I can say that some stuff went really wrong along the way. And so you got to figure out how to communicate so that you don't have to go back to that. But if there comes to a place where, hey, people aren't in agreement, we've got to vote, you want to have all of that figured out ahead of time so that when it comes time to vote, that everybody knows what to expect and they're going to actually submit to the process that you've laid out. And so for things like selling the property, we do a super majority. So, depending on the structure of the partnership, but just in general, 70% is going to be required to sell, refinance, or, go in forbearance or some other big financial impact to the property. Smaller decisions can probably be done with 50 some percent. And the way that I look at it, especially if I'm the asset manager or the contract that I wrote on the deal, I'm looking for ways that myself and the person who has the most money in the deal can make a decision. If we can make a decision with just the two of us, then I'll structure it that way, because in essence, they have the most to lose, right? They've signed the loan and they've got a lot of cash in the deal, and I'm the person actually executing the plan. But if people don't agree with what I'm doing, I want the group to be able to override me, because if there's a king and it's a monarchy and the person can just dictate to everybody what happens, I think you can get in real trouble, especially if a person loses alignment with what and they're trying to do what's best for them.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, one thing I'll add, I think Erickson, in your question, the answer is right there. You just be proactive with it. Be proactive and figure out who's going to be in which swim lane. And if all that's specified in the operating agreement, all that's pre-agreed to, like Jerome said, if you have to go back to the operating agreement, something's probably a little amiss. But and the other thing I'd say is just talk about it a lot. I mean, my example with 4 Oaks Capital, there's 4 of us. Our operating agreement says all decisions have to have 3 out of 4. Just because even number of people, you get 2 out of 2, you got just as many saying no as you have saying yes. So, but we also have a couple of big ticket items that are 4 out of 4, where all 4 of us have to agree. And acquisitions is one of them. Bringing on a partner is another one. So we've gone through a lot of time talking about exactly how we would handle situations before they come up. Just trying to avoid that. All right.
Without the emotion, right? When people are frustrated or irritated, their decision-making capacity goes down the tube.
Yep.
And so everybody's happy and smiling at each other, that's when you want to iron this stuff out.
Yeah, agree.
Misstep number 3, undercapitalizing, baby. I've done this one a time or two, right? And so some people will say, oh, we'll just fund the rehab out of cash flow. It doesn't ever really work out, because the rehab's going to cost more than you expect it to. It always does. There's something that pops up that you don't see coming. No liquidity after closing. If you do a bank deal, they're going to do everything they can to make sure that you don't end up in the spot. But I know some people will do creative financing, or they'll buy a deal cash and they'll spend everything that they have. And then something pops up with the property and they get in trouble pretty quickly because they don't have a way to take care of it. Closing without taking fees. I've done this because we've come up short on the raise, and I think it is the absolute wrong way to do it. But you do what you have to do in order to get deals closed, because your reputation is more important than money. But with that said, if you can optimize, if you can get all the cash in, if you can take a fee so that you don't have to worry about how you're going to eat or some of the other stuff that people think about when they're going through these projects and in that early startup phase and trying to figure out how they're going to replace income and some of this other stuff, you really want to make sure that you're fully funded going in, because financial pressure is one of those things that breaks people and makes them do things that are out of the ordinary or out of their character. If you don't know what it takes to actually run your property and cover all your expenses, you're going to get yourself in trouble if you're doing some type of value add, right? If you've got to renovate, or if you're changing the way your property is leased and you dip down below that, then you're going to be writing a check. And writing checks for mortgages or expenses is no fun. I've done it more times than I care to say. And I will tell you that, there is nothing enjoyable about struggling to check for $7,000 for a mortgage or whatever the mortgage amount is. Investors backing out is something that happens to everybody that I know. There are people who say, hey, we're going to do the deal. And then when it comes time to write the check, they don't actually write. And so I've heard people say you need to raise 2 to 3 times whatever you plan to bring to the deal. And I think it's probably closer to 3 than 2, especially early on, because people are kind of skittish when it comes to these deals. Cutting your splits down. This one's no fun, right? So you think that you can do a 80-20 split or a 70-30 split, and then you have to bring it back down to 85-15 or 90-10. You realize that you're not going to make much money on this deal. It's great to get the deal done, but not getting paid and working for free is not exciting for anybody, especially when you got something that's going to go 3, 5, 7 years. You really, really want to make sure that you're getting compensated for the work, because this is hard work, contrary to what a lot of people try to make this seem to be. There's a lot of effort and there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And so make sure, especially on the fees and cutting your splits, if you're going to be an operator, that you're actually getting comped, because people will let you work for free and smile about it. And it's not actually very rewarding on the back end.
Yeah, I can tell you, we've done 2 out of the 6 on this list, and you're right, they're not fun. If you want to know which 2 out of the 6, I think I talked about them on Jerome's podcast and Julie's podcast, so go check them out. But I'll talk a little bit about investors backing out, because somebody brought this up in a forum earlier today, where they were raising a certain amount of money. They had twice as much committed and ended up with less. But one thing we learned is ask the people where the money is coming from. So if somebody commits to putting $50,000 in your deal, all right, make sure they actually have $50,000. If they say, oh, it's sitting in a retirement account, ask them, is it an SDIRA? Is it an EQRP? Do you have checkbook control? Because if it's sitting in their 401k, they're not going to be able to touch that money. They just might not know. If they're expecting to sell a house, we had an investor back out on us once because he expected to sell his house and walk away with $50,000. Well, it turns out there was a lot of problems with the sale, and he walked away with $15,000. And so, it's just one of those things where that's really helped us a lot to reduce the amount of investors backing out, just by asking them the simple question of, do you have the money ready to invest, or where is the money sitting right now? And make sure that it's liquid enough that they can just roll it right into the property.
Jules. All right, number 2. This is a big one. So once you get this thing rolling, man, if you're not creating systems, you are going to be beating your head against a wall. And so what does that mean? There's some things that you're going to have to do every month, some things you're going to do every week, other things you're going to do once a year. If you have to manually key all those things or create them from scratch, you're going to be losing so much of your time that you could be applying to finding the next deal or some of the other stuff that's necessary in order to run one of these businesses. And so once you realize that you got to do something over and over again, you want to set up a system so that it's as automated as possible. Examples of stuff that's going to be repetitive tasks: your market analysis, figuring out how to get people to bring deal flow to you, right? It's one thing to manually go check LoopNet every day. It's something totally different to get the automated email coming to you. It's one thing to reach out and call brokers every week or every few days. It's another thing to opt into their list so that whenever a deal that meets your criteria comes out, you're on the distribution list. Distributing money. I know Dan Hanford sends out monthly distributions, and I was like, how in the world are you guys doing that? And he's doing it before the 15th. He's like, yeah, well, we've got it set up, blah, 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 blah. And we get our reports on the 10th, and then checks go out, or the ETFs or the wires go out the day after or 2 days after, so that everybody has their money by the 15th. And I just think it's a great system for people who are, again, doing those things monthly or weekly. Once you close a deal, there's going to be a lot of people who are interested in partnering. And if you made money for folks, there's going to be a lot of people interested in investing with you. And so spending the time to vet those folks and having a systemized process to work through them. The guys at Four Oaks have a great process for doing that, which when I first heard it, I was like, oh my gosh, but it makes a lot of sense. And Brian, I don't know if you're willing to share that with the group, but I think it's worth talking about.
I was responding to a comment down in the chat for a second, so I apologize on that one. What part did we explain to you?
The process that you guys go through when new people come into this.
Oh, yeah. Okay, got it. Yeah, so we try to have people talk to more. There's Four Oaks. I mean, there's 4 of us, right? So we try to have them talk to 2 or 3 of us on every single investor, so it doesn't happen every time, but typically it'll go something like this. If somebody calls me up, you know, I'll take their call, I'll talk to them about investing, but more often than not, I'm going to put them on the phone with either Eric or Todd or Brian, and so, by the time, the deal comes around, they've talked to 2 or 3 or 4 of us, and they're comfortable with the team, because I think it's more important. I think the team in syndication is more important than the actual deal. If two deals are exactly the same, and you have a team that can perform and a team who doesn't perform, the team makes the deal, really. So a lot said about that. So I want people to be comfortable with the entire team. Occasionally, we'll have 1 or 2 investors that, just talk to one of us, but in the end, they're talking to me, they're talking to Malin, they'll go over underwriting with Eric, or they'll talk with Todd about stuff. So that's our general framework. And more often than not, the investors know who all 4 of the Oaks are.
Beautiful. All right. And then the last one here is thought leadership content. And so one of the most important things, well, I like doing this test. I'm going to steal it from somebody else. So what's most important? That people know you, like you, or trust you? Put it in chat. What's most important? Do people knowing you, liking you, or trusting you? I can't see the chat, so.
Okay, we got trust, no, trust, no, trust, trust. No, trust. And Heath put no in all caps, so maybe that's 2 no's.
Emphasis.
And Hutch wrote it twice. Hutch can't vote twice.
Hutch is a Marine. He does.
And then trust. And then trust. Oh, Ashton, I think I like Ashton's answer. Trust, but they can't do that unless they know you.
Thanks for stealing the punchline, Ashton.
Yeah. So.
All right.
You got about half trust and half no's.
Okay. Nobody wants to be liked. Cool.
Yeah.
So I think this is the way that it actually goes, guys. Somebody gets to know you, right? So the answer is no, because if they don't know you, don't have the opportunity to like you. And if they don't like you, they're probably not going to trust you. It's just kind of the way that the thing goes, right? So knowing you is super important. So why am I saying that? Because thought leadership content is the way that people are going to get to know you for apartment investing. I think the majority of people have some other career and then they transition into being some form of an owner or operator. And in order to go from, being a Marine to being an apartment investor, people got to see you doing some stuff around apartments to say, oh yeah, Hutch or Heath know what they're talking about when it comes to apartments. They're not just serving in our military some way, shape, or form or capacity. And so that can be social media, that can be a book, that can be a podcast, that can be whatever you come up with, a blog, whatever it is, you've got to demonstrate your knowledge. And it's the thought leadership content in a system looks like those things. What it looks like in not a system is, hey, David, let's jump on a call so I can talk to you about apartment investing. And I do that one by one by one. And you might not like my approach, and there's really no reason for me to talk to you about me and apartment investing if you don't like my approach, because we're not going to do anything together. And that part for me is super important. You can attract the people to you if you can control the choke point, right? So for instance, me, I do joint ventures. I don't enjoy syndication. I think that the majority of people should start with joint ventures. And by being a joint venture operator, if you want to move to syndication later, then you can do that because you've actually got some operational experience. There are other people who skip and just go straight to syndication, raising money from other people. If somebody wants to do a syndication, you don't want to call me. You want to call the guys at Four Oaks, right? And it was funny because Brian had somebody call. They called Brian about a deal, and Brian said, no, you need to talk to Jerome about that deal. And I mean, it's just deciding, hey, this is what I'm doing, and this is how I'm doing it. And if this resonates with you, I want to talk to you. If it doesn't, I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking to you about that, but I might get to know about you and your family or your journey or something else. But we don't need to spend time talking about my apartment philosophy because it just doesn't align with what you're working on or working towards.
Yeah. Now, I'll tell you a good example that happened to me a couple of days ago. I work in the Pentagon, right? That's my day job. I ran into a guy that I haven't seen in 5 years. Okay. And 5 years ago, I owned, 2 single family investment homes. Right. So he sees me in the hall and he's standing next to somebody else that we, a mutual friend of both of ours. He looks at me and says, "Here comes the real estate mogul." You know, I'm not a mogul yet. All right. But I see him, I walk over, I smile. I didn't shake his hand because, that's not kosher anymore. But, and he looked at me and said, "Hey, let's talk later. You got me thinking about investing." You know, that's, I think, where you want to be with your thought leadership, where people are coming to you. It's just one of those, try to put good content out there. And another thing that I always try to do is if somebody comes to me asking for help and I know somebody who can help them, I'll be happy to make a referral to anybody, anytime. But all right, one question, Jerome, in the chat. Great question. How does one become a thought leader when they haven't done a deal or raised capital yet?
Yeah. So you go ask people who've done it is the way that I've seen it done most, right? And I think what some people talk about is organize a meetup, right? And the great thing about the virtual meetups now is you can attend meetups and have people come to your meetup from all over the country. Like I saw Kalen was on here earlier. He's in San Antonio, Texas, right? Dealing in the Gaithersburg meetup. I'm in Greensboro, North Carolina right now. In the past, I would have had to drive or fly to Northern Virginia to hang out with you guys if I was fortunate enough to be invited. And so what it does is once you become the organizer of whatever it is, you become the de facto leader. And that you don't have to misrepresent yourself. You don't have to do any of that. You just say, "Hey, I'm interested in this. I'm putting a group together of other people who are interested in it. And because we have that group, we're going to attract different speakers to come in and share their wisdom and knowledge with us." And by you being the person that's facilitating that stuff, you get instant credibility. The other piece of that is I think you spend a bunch of time in education, right? Whether you work with some education group or you find some other way to get some coaching, I think there is a lot of value in getting knowledge. And I talked about this a little bit on Brian's podcast episode that we did together, but I think every investor is working on 4 things. It doesn't matter where they are in the continuum, but the bottom is knowledge, right? So if you can get knowledgeable, you become a thought leader because you've got knowledge. And that's not just consuming content, but it's getting exposure to other people and developing a circle of folks who can pour into you and help get problems solved. The next thing is deal flow. And so you apply that knowledge against leads to find deals. After the deals, you need experience so that you can get bank debt. And after the experience, you need capital so that you can close those things. And there's a lot of people who feel a lot of different ways. That's my prescription for how you get one of these deals done. Get knowledgeable, find a deal because that makes you valuable. Once you find the deal, you go take that to the relationships you've been cultivating with experienced operators and show them the deal. And through creating that relationship, alignment of values, so on and so forth, you're likely to get a partnership done and a piece of the deal. And then capital follows experience. This is not single family where capital follows the deal. Capital follows experience because you actually have to execute on your business plan in order to generate a return. Buying it low is not enough. This isn't a stock. You actually have to operate the business.
Nice. Good answer. Hey, and one thing I'll point out, a month ago we had Adam Adams on the show. And I think I asked this while we were in the group. I may have asked this, I also recorded a podcast with him the same week. But if I didn't ask in the group, I'll still repeat it. He talked about, beginning a podcast and syndicating, and all of his background, but he didn't put things in order. And so I asked him, what came first, the podcast or your first syndication? And his answer was the podcast. Yeah. So you look at guys who have been in the business for a long time, and a lot of those guys started their thought leadership. Michael Blanc was blogging on Bigger Pockets before podcasts were a big thing, and that's how he started his thought leadership. Then it rolled into the podcast. But there's ways to do it. But I think Jerome hit the nail on the head. Don't be a pretender. Don't pretend you're something you're not. Be genuine and be honest and open about it.
Yeah. And so we're rolling into the last one. Anybody want to guess what the last misstep is? We've been talking for a minute. Give me some interaction. Anybody know what number one is? Number one. Come on, put it in the chat. I'm actually going to.
I'm just going to guess not starting.
Nope. Almost gave it away. Did anybody guess? I don't know.
I just saw Yona, and I was, like, wow. So Yona is the fifth misstep.
Yep. Yona's the fifth misstep.
Trying to know everything, operating, being a knowledge broker, squirrels.
Chasing the squirrels.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not going to get any more guesses, I guess. So the last one is focusing on everything but operating, right? There's so much to do in the business. And the fact of the matter is, once you actually get your deal done, right? Once you get into the deal, you want to focus on operating that deal as well as you can. And I never really enjoyed when people would tell me, and when I asked, how do I get a promotion here? Do an amazing job in the job that you have, right? And it's like, what? That doesn't tell me anything. That's not actionable. But the fact of the matter is, your next deal is based on your performance on the deal you have. People have a really short memory. I can make money for them this year in a deal, and I can lose money on the next deal, and those folks probably won't come back because they forgot based on what happened just now. And so if you're focused on everything except operating the deal that you have, I think you can get in trouble really quickly because you took your eye off the ball. And what do people focus on? The next market they're going to enter, what contract they should be writing, what deal can they close, who should they partner and invest with to get the thing funded, what social media posts should they be making, who's the next broker to meet, which mastermind should they join, which podcast interviews should they do, what conference to go to next, what thought leadership content to produce, and who to take a selfie with. And so what's crazy is Jonah came to Charlotte, which is about an hour away from me, and we met in the middle just so we could take a selfie, because the joke is you go to conferences, just take selfies with people, right? And people don't actually spend the time doing meaningful interactions. They don't actually learn anything when they go into the sessions. And so it's just a selfie fest with the goal of being in a picture with somebody who is famous so that you can get credibility from that person being in a picture with you. And you'll see it when people take pictures with presidents or other celebrities. Exact same things happen in a multifamily space. And Spencer Hilligoss made a post one point. He's like, I don't measure my success at the conference by people that I took selfies with. And so just keep that in mind, guys. Like, once you get your deal done, you want to be really focused on operating that deal and not so focused on doing everything but that. The best thing you can do is have an amazing track record, because that is what people are going to talk about, either how well you did on the deal or how much you didn't do well. And so, I just wanted to talk about the Mid-Atlantic Multifamily Investing Conference, because we're having that again in March of 2021, and we got early bird tickets for that. And then the powwow at the mountaintop is the only mastermind for dads. And so we don't just talk about our multifamily investing dads. We don't just talk about the business, but we talk about how you can be a better father and committed partner in whatever relationships that you're in. And I promise you some free resources. And so I've got 2 podcasts, Multifamily Missteps, where we hear war stories from operators, and they tell you the good, the bad, and absolutely the ugly, so that you won't have to make those same mistakes. And then Dreamcatchers is a story of people who exited the Matrix. And so I'm a big fan of that movie, and I just want to help people actually work in their passion. And then the last thing, if you hit our website, myersmethods.com, you can get a free 4-step guide that explains why we like joint ventures over syndications, what you can bring to a deal if you don't have any experience. And the hope is that, this will help you get the ball rolling so you can either do your next deal or get your first deal done. And so that's everything, man. We've got 5 minutes left if you want to get some more questions going. You're on mute, so you're a rookie.
Sorry, my daughter walked by, and I didn't want you guys to hear her going in and out of the bathroom. But One question in the chat box: how would one go about getting a good contractor and protecting oneself from price matters? So finding a contractor and then making sure you're not overpaying.
Yeah, so I think the first step is hiring a property manager who actually has executed the business plan that you want to execute, because they're going to have people that they prefer to partner with. And if you are the person that's bringing everything together, everybody might not play well in the sandbox. So my first thought is you want to go to your property manager for all the vendors, because they are executing in that market. And through their expertise and experience, you should get led to the right person. With that said, I didn't do that my first deal that I wrote my contract, and that person that I hired didn't have access to the right vendors. Fortunately, I'm a licensed contractor, so I was able to go execute on my own. But had I not done that, I would have been in a world of hurt. And to your point, I had somebody send in a bid to the property manager of $3,500, and then they turned around and send the invoice in for $7,000, and the scope didn't change, and there was no change order to go with it.
And one thing, Jerome, that I like that you're doing is, your investments are all in and around Greensboro, right? So, after you work in a specific area for a while, you're going to know, a handful of trusted contractors. Maybe you came to the table already knowing a couple of trusted contractors, but I agree wholeheartedly. Rely on property manager who's the expert in the area for your referrals, and you also have to be on top of them. You also have to be involved as well. I could go on a long time about that. But all right, other questions? Got time for one more if somebody can quickly type. I love that. You can see like the wall between my headsets. That's beautiful. Julie, okay. That's a good point, Julie. The new seminar selfie is the collage pic. So I'm making sure I'm going to hit my print screen right now. There we go. We got everybody. Lovely. All right, everybody make sure you take a screenshot of what's going on right now so you can post it tomorrow on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on all your social media. Make sure you tag me, of course, and Jerome, and we'll all be better. All right.
John asked a question, which I think is amazing. The short answer on that question, John, is yes, there are people who don't make all these mistakes. And it's because they have some form of mentorship or insurance, as some people call it, where somebody more experienced is looking over their shoulder and saying, don't do this, don't do that. You really want to consider this. And they're guiding them along it. I consider it driver's ed. That's the best way I can characterize it. You want somebody in the car with you that has experience that can keep you from running off the road. And the people who just go it alone from podcasts and YouTube, they end up making all these mistakes and more. And they thought that they saved money, but the reality of the situation is they just made it worse for themselves.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, whether it's a paid for mentor or you find someone more experienced that you're providing value to, I had a paid mentor through the Michael Blanc program. One of my partners had a paid mentor in the Michael Blanc program. Another one of my partners was in the Rod Cleef program. All right. So we had a lot of mentorship going. And the great thing was, when we ran into a snag early on, I'd call my mentor, my partners would call their mentors, and we'd all huddle back. And we had one really big snag, and we literally got all the mentors on the line with, the four of us and talked the whole thing through, so we made mistakes, and like I said, there was that one slide where I said, hey, we've done 2 or 3 of those. 2 or 3 of those were on our first deal, but yeah, mentors are absolutely vital.
Yeah, John, the only thing I could add to this, man, is like the whole point of this conversation from my perspective is so that people don't go make those same mistakes, right? I don't want people to make these mistakes, which is why I want to talk about it. It's not sexy, but the fact that like you can avoid these things if you're aware of them and you can look for them, because for me, that's the game. If there's a saber-toothed tiger in the bush, I want somebody to say, don't go over there. There's a saber-toothed tiger. You're going to get eaten. Or if there's, people shooting arrows on the other side of the hill, don't go over the hill. Like, stay over here. It's safe.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Jerome, you did it. You talked for a whole hour. That was awesome. I mean, I loved every minute of it. And just administratively, we did record it, and it will go up on. I usually put them in the Facebook group and post a link to the YouTube. So I'll post it on YouTube, put a link into the Facebook group, and that way everybody can see it later. All right. And it's actually a Facebook page, not a group. So it's, anybody can go see it. You don't have to ask to be part of it. All right. So if you didn't take good notes, go back and watch it. Jerome, thank you very much. As always, you delivered. You provided a ton of value. I loved everything. I even learned, took a couple notes here and there, learned a thing or two. That said, the second half, it's 8 o'clock on the dot right now. The second half, we break everybody up into breakout rooms. Looks like we have 34 people. And here's what I'd ask: if you're not going to hang around for networking, now's the time to hop out, because usually what happens is I set up my first networking group, and then I get 6 people dropped out, and I end up with like one group of 2 groups of 4, and everything else across the map. So, but yeah, we'll put you up into breakout rooms. I'm going to try to put, 4 to 5 for the first go round, because there'll still be 1 or 2 people that drop, and we'll set the timer for 15 minutes. All right. So you guys got 15 minutes to chat. And after that, you'll be back here, and we'll basically set everything up again and rinse and repeat. All right. Actually, before we do that, one real quick thing. Shameless self-promotions, okay? And they can be shameless, they can be legit. I'll go first. I have a podcast, and lots of people in this room right now have been on my podcast. Diary of an Apartment Investor, check it out. Who's got something?
Hutch and I are doing an EQRP webinar next Monday, 7 p.m. Central, with Damian Lupo about freeing TSP. So if you have a thrift savings plan, originally we haven't been able to access it, but now thanks to the CARES Act, you can. And Damian Lupo is going to be on all afternoon or evening talking about it. So just plugging that real quick.
All right. Hey,
6 p.m. that is.
Where do they find it?
My bad.
So I know I've seen your post, and it's limited to the first 100 people. How can they reserve a spot?
Heath, you have the link?
Link in the chat.
Yeah,
Drop
let me get that.
All right. Who else has a plug?
Justin and I are closing in our first deal in a couple weeks, so we're really excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations,
Steve.
Yep.
So
Been a little while coming. Georgia, what city is that in? It's
Augusta.
Augusta. Yes, Augusta. Yep, that's a pretty little deal. Hope it all goes well for you guys. And remember what Jerome said, focus on the operation. So, hey, speaking of closing deals, Leslie, hit the unmute button and tell them about that monster deal you closed here in DC.
Hi everyone, Leslie here. We closed a 49 unit class AD property here in Petworth. That was about 3 weeks ago. That's our first deal. Very excited and grateful to be part of. So, and great to be here amongst all you guys. We also host a meetup once every month. First Monday of the month is the Exciting World of Multifamily Investing meetup. Yep. Please join us as well. Let's keep networking and learning and growing. And
you guys are still virtual right now, right?
Yes, sir. We're probably going to stay virtual because like you said, the outreach is bigger. Yep. But maybe do like the once in a while face-to-face events as well.
Yep. Yeah, and your meetup was in Columbia, Maryland, right? I've been to it.
Yes.
Just trying to remember where Columbia.
It was in College Park.
College Park.
But yeah, but once we go back live, we'll probably change the location.
Okay. Yeah, I just put the address in my phone and I drove. I don't remember exactly where it was, but it was a great meetup.
Yeah.
All right. Julie Hawley has a podcast. You want to say something?
Okay. Well, actually, yes, I do, but I want to give a total plug to Heath and Hutch. Make sure you go to that because Damien is fantastic. And I've come across a lot of people that don't understand a lot of those intricacies, and it will really help out your passive investors in a monstrous way. So great. But also, go check out Ask Me How I Know. It's my podcast, and it's super fun. It's very casual. It looks like that. That's the little cover that you'll see. And the fun thing about it is that I think Michael went off, but I am a new investor. I am exactly what Jerome is talking about. I'm a new investor. I am trying to garner all the experience from other people so I don't make mistakes and that I can share that with other people. So having one conversation with one person versus me having that conversation and sharing it with everyone is really powerful. So they're very different conversations in a lot of podcasts. They're very casual, lots of mindset. So you get a backstory behind people. So check it out.
Yep. Unscripted, free flowing. It's a lot of fun.
I'm going to drop a link to the episode that you were on, Brian, because that was so much fun.
Yeah. You know what? We should have hit the record button long before we did, because we probably talked for like 45 minutes before we started recording, but probably the funnest podcast I ever recorded. So, all right. Anybody else?
Yeah. Can I go real quick, Brian? Hey guys, Hirsch Rye here. You guys have probably seen me on LinkedIn more than you should, but that's okay. We have a webinar next Monday as well. I don't know if it conflicts with Hutch's time or not. It's at 7 p.m. Eastern. I don't know if it's at the same time. I'm not trying to one-up anything, but we're bringing in a Navy SEAL who's also a doctor, physician, entrepreneur, and a board member who will be coming to speak about mindset and the growth of mindset. So if you want to come to that, feel free. Thanks.
All right. Good enough. And Hirsch is going to be on the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I think we record on Wednesday, right?
Yeah, Wednesday morning.
All right. Good enough.
I don't have a promotion, but just a piece of news people may or may not be aware of is upcoming election. Part of Biden's ticket is to get rid of a lot of the tax advantages that are in commercial multifamily investing. So maybe you know about that or not, but if you don't, it might be worth looking into.
All right. All right. So here we go.
Get out and vote for the things that mean a lot to you.
Yep. Get out and vote for